Froozed. Hi. Are we on? Can't really ever tell. Done. Redirecting to YouTube. And bingo bango. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. I bet it's on. Like, that's the one bad thing about this is I think it starts streaming before it shows you that it's streaming, which may just be my internet connection and not actually the app. It may be very immediate. But let's check this boy out. Okay. All right. It seems to be broadcasting. Yeah, see, because like I see myself. Okay, anyway. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Quaranreads. My name is Raven, and we are going to be talking about Pachinko by Minjin Lee. About a little bit last week. Again, it is about a family, so it's going to span multiple generations and ends in the 80s, I think, the 1980s. It starts in the like 1910s or something. And so the first section of the book is called, what the heck is this section called? She said, without remembering, Gohyang, or hometown. Gohyang. And then the next section is called Motherland. And so we talked a little bit about Huni and his parents in the boarding house. And then we learned about Youngjin and her, and who is Huni's wife, and their daughter Sunja. And so now we are learning about Sunja's life and relationship with Isek, who was the pastor that came to stay at the boarding house. So if you'll recall, Sunja was having a relationship with a man who was much older than her. She's like 16 and he's like a 40-year-old man, 30-something, 40-something. It's not really quite clear because a couple of different things get said about how old he is, but what we know is that he's much older than her, like old enough to be her father. And they start having like an intimate relationship. It's kind of this older man taking advantage of her a little bit because, he's much older than her. He's being really super friendly and really like protective, but then like he takes her like by herself and then like has sex with her, which she has no like concept of before this. So he's kind of like doing something that she doesn't know like what's really going on. And he's basically taking advantage of this teenage girl. And then she becomes pregnant. She finds out that he's already married and has a family in Japan. And here she is, pregnant by herself in South Korea. And she's not sure how she's going to explain this to her mom. And in this period of time, it's pretty much ruination for a woman and this is like pretty much around the world. Like if you got pregnant and you weren't married, like you were just a harlot. And this is like the 30s. So it's a little bit like softer in Western cultures, but it's still pretty much a stigma. Like you still heard stories about like girls going away for a while because they got pregnant and then they come back and like there's no baby because they just put the baby up for adoption or something. So yeah, it's pretty much ruination for a girl to be pregnant during this time period. So of course, like her mother, Youngjin, is trying to keep it quiet. It's very hurt. They're both very like hurt, and like Sunja does not tell like anyone who the man is that got her pregnant. But anyway, this pastor, young, handsome pastor, just leaving his, I guess what would be called like a seminary, his school for like pastor people, whatever it's called. But he's just leaving that, and he's heading to Osaka, but he goes down to Busan because he's going to take the ferry over to Japan from Busan. But he was like going to stay for a month in Busan and then go over to Osaka where his brother lives with his wife and where he was going to lead a church in Osaka. So if you don't know, Osaka's in Japan. Busan is in South Korea. Busan is like an island at the south of South Korea. I think it's an island, but it's at the very south of South Korea. South Korea is a peninsula that's like, if you got a map of Asia, like there's like China, there's Japan, and then South Korea is like a peninsula that kind of comes off of China. Well, Korea in general, because at this time there is no North and South Korea. It was just Korea, and so Korea is a peninsula that comes off of China. Um, it's always kind of been its own thing. It had the nickname the Hermit Nation because even like all of the ancient China stuff that you've ever heard of was happening. Korea was its own thing, and like it was hard to take over Korea, and Korea never really interacted with. I mean, not that they didn't, but like it was just Korea was like pretty separate from everything. There was some like Chinese involvement because like if you know anything about Korean language, like if you know anything about Korean language and like Mandarin, like there are some similarities with like certain things, and then also like a lot of East Asia has use of like Chinese script, like writing practices. Korea has its own writing practice. Writing style, like very famously, they have their own Hangul. Um, Hangul was created to be like easy, and it is. I have spent some time learning Korean. It's like much easier than like learning Japanese or like Japanese has a lot of characters that you have to learn, like different character systems. Korean has this one, and Korean's Hangul's boast is that it's very simple. Like it's supposed to be based on the position of the tongue in the mouth, but I don't know if that's accurate. I just know that it's very easy to read. It's very phonetic. Um, so it's the Hermit Nation. They got their own like systems and their own like everything, right? So at this point in the book, Japan is now like colonizing Korea. So um, a lot of Japanese people are coming to Korea to live, um, but the way that they look at Korean people is bad. Like they look down on Korean people. It's very reminiscent to me of how like Europe was treating Jewish people at the time. This is around the same time like all of that stuff was happening, and they look at Korean people as like dirty, as like tricksters, like kind of like bad people who like do bad things. And so the Japanese have kind of come to Korea to take over. Some Korean people have moved to Japan, but they're still treated bad, and they're like ushered into these little separate neighborhoods. So that's where we find our um, young woman, Sunja. She's in South Korea. She's in Busan, and she's in Korea at the time, but it's South Korea today. That's why I keep saying South Korea. Busan is in South Korea today. Um, so this guy comes from the north, and he's a young pastor. He comes down there. He tends to stay with at the boarding house, but he's sick, and he has been sickly his whole life, and he ends up having tuberculosis. And so like while he's staying with them, he's like really sick with tuberculosis, and her father had died of tuberculosis. So Yunja and Youngjin and Sunja were like, oh, let's take care of him and like make sure that he is okay, because like they know how serious tuberculosis can be because they lost their husband and father to it. And after a while, he gets kind of nursed back to health. He's still not like 100%, but he's like not like sick anymore. And he feels very grateful to them. He's just like a good person in general. Like he's the best. And so he finds out that Sunja is pregnant by this other guy. And he's like, I want to marry her. So that's how it starts. So now it's like he has kind of convinced her to marry him. It's better for the baby to be born um, with a father, like in a marriage with a father, because I guess some kind of law is that you can't register a child that does not have a father. And so that's bad. So the kid would have to live as a bastard for the rest of their life. And so by marrying her, he's basically saving her and the baby. Um, but yeah, so she's kind of like still kind of caught up on like old nasty man. And like anyway, by like today's standards, it would even be weird. Like to us, like it would be weird for Isek to be marrying her too because he's like a 20 something. Like he's like in his 20s and she's like 16. So to us, like that would be weird today too. But we are talking about a time period in which girls who were 15 or 16 were supposed to get married. And the people who were going to marry them were usually grown men who were like in their 20s, because sometimes older than that, but like usually in their 20s, because they would have to have some kind of like establishing of their life in order to afford the bride price. So like odds are a 16-year-old boy, unless his family's very rich, is not going to have the bride price. And even if he did, his family's probably, like if he's a more wealthier family, they're probably going to want him to go get some sort of education, which is the case with Isak. He is from a wealthier family, so they wanted him to get some sort of education. Um, so usually a young man will have some sort of education or serve in the military or something before he gets married. And with Isek's case, he wasn't going to get married because he was so sickly, and he had been like expecting to die his whole life. Never thought he'd live to be 25, and now I think he's 26 or 27. I think he's 26, and so he's like, I did live that long. You know, she needs someone to marry her so that the baby is not illegitimate, and I probably can't take a wife on any other terms because I might die and leave her a young widow. But in this case, it's like good for both of them. He gets to have a wife. She gets to like not be looked down upon for being pregnant outside of marriage. And they need to get approval of the other pastor in town, who's Pastor Shin. And so like Sunja and her family are not religious, so they don't know anything about Christianity. And at this time period, Christianity is like something that missionaries had brought to South Korea, or to Korea in general, because actually where Isek is from is today North Korea. He's from Pyongyang. So yeah, so missionaries were bringing Christianity to Korea. It's very interesting that he's from Pyongyang. Like I'm learning things from this book, and like I said, I was very interested in Korea and Korean culture, and like studying Korean for a long time, like Korean language. And like I knew some of this history, but like it's very interesting to me that you know this character is from Pyongyang, and like he's from this very Christian family, and like the Canadian missionaries had been there, and like he's like a pastor and stuff. Because if you know anything about North Korea today, like religion is like illegal there. It's like I don't think you can have a religion. I think it's illegal. Um, Partially, I think it's because like the Kim family is like God King family. So it's like worshiping a god is like bad for the Kims because you need to worship the Kims. I don't know, something like that. But it's very interesting because I think religion is illegal in in North Korea. Um, and if you know anything about South Korea, Christianity is a very popular religion there. So it's interesting. They A lot of South Koreans are Christian. Um, but yeah, um, so at this time, Sunja and her mother Youngjin do not have a religion. They don't really have a religion. They kind of subscribe to the um the like cultural stuff, which is like, you care for like the graves of your deceased loved ones because you want to keep the spirits appeased, but they don't really even like subscribe to that much because Huni didn't just subscribe to any religion. So he's basically like an atheist, um, without the fancy title of atheist. Um, but yeah, so they have to go get approval from this pastor, and this pastor is just evil. Like, it's like he's not evil, but he's like very mean to her. He's just like basically you're a slut. Like you got pregnant. I really shouldn't be approving this marriage because you might be a slut and this is bad for your husband and like all this stuff. And I'm just like, no one knows this little girl's story, and you're just like, she's a slut immediately. Horrible. Immediately she's a slut. Come on. Whereas like his brother, like upon meeting her, is just like she's so like innocent that I feel like was she raped? And that is far closer to what happened to her. Like she's not like considering it rape herself, but it's far closer to what happened to her because she doesn't really consent and she doesn't really even know what's going on. It's just that she likes this guy so much that she's kind of letting him do whatever the hell he wants to do to her without like really even understanding what's going on, which is kind of rape because he's never like, hey, are you interested in me sexually? Would you like to have a sexual relationship? Do you even know what sex is? Like, so anyway, the pastor's very mean to her, but he does just, go ahead and marry them, but in a quick little quiet ceremony. And like, they end up going to Japan. And now they're in Japan with um with Isek's brother, and it's much different from what she's used to. Um, and the Korean people there kind of live in these ghettos, which is like again very reminiscent of the way out groups were treated all around the world at that time. So like you think about like Jewish people in Europe, you think about like Black people and immigrants, like the wrong types of white people in the US, were treated that way, and also non-white immigrants as well. But like, you know, at the time, like being Polish or Italian was bad in the US. Like, go over there, Italians. So it's like very reminiscent of like how people who were not the desired people were treated in any given country in the 30s. So it's very interesting. And like you don't really think about like I guess like in the West we don't think about like the stuff that Japan was doing other than the fact that they were like part of the Axis and part of the whole bad thing that was happening with World War II. But yeah, we don't think about like we don't talk about Japan. And it's also because Japan has done an excellent job rebranding and like as a person who's Western and does not have any ties to either of these two cultures, I am going to cautiously talk about Japan because I don't also want to be like demonizing another country. And also, I don't really want to like go into that like too deep. But Japan did an excellent job with rebranding in the terms of like most Westerners don't even think about Japan as being imperialistic. Like we think about it, but we don't. And we kind of like if you ask someone about thinking about Japan today, we think about like anime and like sushi and like fun stuff and like cute stuff, like or like high tech things. And you don't really think about like the violent history that Japan has. And yeah, it's kind of messed up a little bit because we ignore the problems that they caused for other countries, and especially South Korea. And it's weird because South Korea is our ally. A lot of Americans don't realize that because we talk so much about North Korea that when you talk about Korea, people picture North Korea. and that's very like it's very messed up. We're not very and then the whole Donald Trump thing. Uh, he was not about to like be like, oh yeah, allies. He was barely like that with our like European allies, so definitely not our Asian allies. So yeah, I wish that we knew more about that. I wish we talked more about that. I mean, and also the US history of like doing horrible things to Koreans too. But the US has history of doing horrible things to a lot of people that we don't talk about. So anyway, before we go into anything like that, I'm just gonna open up the thing. I got on here kind of late. I feel like I've been talking for a long time, but I probably haven't been. Because I got on here kind of late. Usually supposed to get on at 6. Does Raven get on at 6? No, Raven gets on late. Don't know why. Don't know why. So anyway, I'm gonna try to post a thing. I'm on Facebook now. So I'm gonna post the link on the Facebook page. So if you want to come and talk about Pachinko, you are quite invited to. But if you don't, that's fine. I like talking to you guys about it. And I know some people are reading and don't want to share their voice as well. If you would like to, if you like have stumbled across us somehow and you would like to join us ever, we are on Quaranreads, Facebook.com. So it's just a group. It's Quaranreads Social Distancing Book Club. So just put that in the search bar. It'll come up. It's the only one. As far as I can tell, nobody has Quaranreads at all except for us. So Quaranreads like quarantine. So anyway, the thing is now posting. It should be posting. Yes, it's posted. And yeah. Okay. So yeah, the book is Pachinko. It's by Minjin Lee. Here it is again. Check it out. Oh, I didn't even post the video on silly me. I didn't post a video on Facebook. So let's do that because oops. Okay. Oops. Okay. Oops. Go. There we go. Whoa. Okay. And now we post. And now we let Mel in. Whoops. It's not normal. Is it working? Okay, there. Hello. Okay, hi. Hello? Can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay, there we are.
Yeah. Hey, I'm so sorry. I don't think the YouTube link posted to the Facebook page.
I know I saw that just now. I was like, oops. That's my fault. Yeah, that's my fault. I was on here talking and then I was like, wait, it's not actually shared. But I remedied that now. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. Anyway, how have you been and how's it going?
Oh, I've been doing okay. I got vaccinated
Oh,
last Friday. So, I got like my first round and I have to go back for a second round.
cool. I'm glad
Oh.
you were able to get it.
Yeah. So I didn't have any like scary side effects or anything. So,
Yeah,
it's like working at
that's good.
school.
They've been saying like that it has fewer side effects than a traditional vaccine because it doesn't have any live virus in it, which is interesting.
Yeah, I know like some people were having some side effects and people were freaking out about it, but I mean, everyone's different. From my experience, it was not bad. So
That's great.
yeah, people might be worried about it.
Yeah, I am probably not going to be able to get it until like April or whenever, because like
Yeah,
the rollout is so slow right now.
I know. I just got it because of working in the school. Otherwise, I also
Yeah.
would not have it. But yeah, so interesting times. But yeah, other than that, I mean, pretty uneventful week.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Thank
How's
God. I mean, like we've had so many crazy, eventful, just as a nation or and as a world, so much like has been going on these past like few months that it's good to have like a week where it's nothing.
Yeah, yeah, seriously.
So exciting to just not have to worry about everything all at once. But yeah.
Yeah. Take some time to kind of recuperate.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
have you read some more into the book this week?
Yeah, I'm about halfway done.
I'm not. I'm just like
That's okay.
slow going it, but it is really good. I'm so enjoying it.
Yeah, that's why I've been reading it so fast because I want to know what happens. But yeah, I'm arguably going too fast. So,
That's okay. That is
I don't know
perfectly
what part
fine.
you're at. I'm at like, let me see. Hold on. I'm reading it on my phone because I read it at work on my lunch break a lot. I'm at chapter 12 of one of the parts. Where am I?
Motherland.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm at like the beginning of Motherland. So I have not gotten through to that
Yeah.
deep yet.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, that's where I am.
But
Okay.
it's
Well, I
so
won't try not to
cool.
spoil anything though. Then.
Yeah. It's always hard to like try not to spoil, but
Yeah.
um I think like one of the things that I really love about her writing style is like it feels very much of the culture. Like
Mhm.
it feels very much like something that would have been translated into English. But I'm
Mm.
pretty sure she wrote it in English, but like
Mm.
it just feels very like so when I'm reading it, I feel like she's doing like an excellent job of like taking you to this world where these people are experiencing these very specific things that have to do with being Korean and living in Japan and all of that stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really cool. That's something I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, I don't necessarily know because I haven't read a lot of
Yeah.
translated Korean things, but that's, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I mean, obviously she definitely like is very knowledgeable about
Yeah.
like this history in this time period and seems to
Yeah,
be
it's
like
so
I
fun.
wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this was based on her own like family and stuff.
Yeah. It's very vivid. It's very,
Yeah.
it takes you there. And then it's also like she does an excellent job of like cultivating the drama cuz like it, this could be like a very boring thing to just like
Yeah.
be like, oh, the family, oh, well, the mom married the guy and went to Japan, but like every moment is just so like full of like, I don't know, like worry or like the drama of like what's happening is so like palpable. And you feel for her every step of the way. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
like it's very emotional in some places and you're just like the things that the characters are experiencing, you can like feel it from their point of view. Like I was just talking about the pastor and how mean he was just being to Sinja.
Mhm.
And it's just like, man, like the way that they used to treat women for like the smallest things is just so like, you know, like today, like almost, I mean, I guess people still act like that, which is the bad
Yeah,
thing.
oh, for sure.
Like there's definitely a 16-year-old pregnant girl somewhere in America right now who's getting a similar talk.
Oh yeah.
But God, it's just really bad. But like the main thing is like if you're 16 and pregnant today, like the stigma's still there, but like it's also not. Like you'll be fine. Nobody will care in the long run. But like for Sunja, it like literally could have ruined her life. Like
Mm-hmm.
she could have had like basically a scarlet letter on her for the rest of her life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, I guess. It's the 30s or something. Yeah, it was like
Yeah,
the
I think it's
30s.
the 30s.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I definitely like there's definitely still I think a lot of like the community I grew up in,
Hmm.
especially I grew up in a like super conservative religious community, and I think definitely that would be a little less, forgiving, I would say.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I think in general, yeah, people would get over it. But
Yeah, it feels like nowadays it would probably be much more of a scandal at the time when it was happening than like no one's gonna look at a 30-year-old woman who had a baby at 16 and be like,
yeah.
oh, you can't marry her because she had a baby at 6. It just isn't as much of a thing anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it wouldn't be. And I mean, there's no like matchmaker going around, so
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense.
It's just, I feel for women throughout history because women have always had to like deal with the worst, like the worst hand in everything. And like I think about the guy who got Sunja pregnant, and it's just he doesn't have to deal. He doesn't like really have to deal with it. Like a girl has to like wear it. She has to actually physically be pregnant. She is visibly pregnant. She has to care for the child once it comes. And a man can have nothing to do with it, and it doesn't affect him in any way. And
Yeah.
like
I
this
mean,
is like such a prime example of it because like this grown man, which is always gonna like make me angry, but this grown man basically just ruins this little girl's life, and now everybody's looking at her like, oh, you're a harlot, you're like a slut because you got pregnant. But this like 38-year-old man got her pregnant, and like he's just running free somewhere. And like
yeah.
I know like as the book progresses, I think he ends up like kind of being there like in the life a little bit. I don't know what happens, and you may know more about
Oh,
it than
yeah,
me.
okay. I don't want to spoil what happens,
Yeah.
but
But like yeah, craziness.
yeah, yeah, it really sucks, and he never really like gets it, I feel like.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't really get it
Yeah.
at all. Yeah, because at least, yeah, like Isaac, the guy she ends up with, is like a decent guy and like gets how hard it must be, kind of a thing,
Hmm.
and doesn't like hold a grudge about it. But I feel like the other guy never really gets it and is like, big deal. Like, doesn't get how hard it's going to be for her. I don't
Yeah,
know.
he's like it like the first time when she tells him, he's just like, "Oh, well, I'll just get you a house and take care of the child." And it's like, that's great. However, at this time, she would still like have a hard time because the social stigma would still be there. And it would reflect badly on her mom too. And it could have even affected the entire business because no one would want to associate with them. So it's like I don't see how he doesn't understand. Like it's like the disconnect. Like you don't understand
Yeah.
that it's a complete societal thing more than it is just taking care of that child financially.
Yeah, and like she can't just leave whenever she wants.
Yeah,
Like he can.
exactly.
Like if everyone there had gotten mad at him, he could just leave. It wouldn't matter.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, he's pretty frustrating. He's pretty frustrating. What part are you at now? You
Um,
at like just after that or after she
I'm
moves?
after she's in Japan already.
Okay. But before, hmm, trying to think.
Before we
Is
see
it
him
when
again.
the baby is still a bit or not born or a baby or
It's right before the baby is born.
okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. A lot of stuff is about to happen. I mean, you know just from
Yeah.
history, a lot of stuff is about to happen.
I also kind
But
of like read the book jacket and stuff, and it's just like, oh well, this and that. And I was like, oh. And like I know what the baby's name is because I accidentally read that.
oh, okay.
But yeah. And I think that's cute. His name is Noah.
Yeah.
Which is they're keeping with the like biblical thing, which is interesting in South Korea. It's very interesting. Well, in Japan, I guess in this case, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's
uh,
interesting. It's like yeah, it's like a religious thing and then it also ends up being a little bit of a form of like rebellion or like some of the
yeah.
I don't know. Since it
I
is
don't know much about like Japan and religion, but I feel like they're not a very religious country, and
no,
I
they're
feel like
not.
they haven't been. I feel like even like their ancient belief system is less religion and more like the spirit of the tree or the spirit of the lake or whatever, and less like the gods. And
Hmm.
so I don't think they're a very religious country. I think they like a lot of East Asia have had some like Buddhism
Hmm.
ties in the past, but like I don't think they're a very religious country. And I
No.
feel like at this in this particular time period, they're very like anti-religion, and like the Christians have kind of an issue there because like the South Korean Christian or the Korean Christians um are kind of on thin ice because they're Korean and then they're also Christian, and like Japan is kind of like allowing them to be Christian, but they also don't necessarily like that people are being religious.
Yeah, and a lot of them are connected to like a lot of protests and stuff too.
Yeah,
It seems like.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Like, it's a Japanese history that we don't learn about so much here. We learn like I don't know what's the extent of like what American schools teach about like Japan, but like I feel like the only stuff we ever really learn about is like Pearl Harbor and like anything to do
Yeah.
with America and the war.
Yeah.
Not really
Like Pearl
much.
Harbor and the Japanese were part of the not like were with the Nazis
Yeah.
and like we had
And
to
I've
drop
always
bombs.
yeah, we drop bombs on them. And I've always kind of wondered like how that worked. Like how were the Japanese with the Nazis? And you know, it kind of makes sense a little bit when you read this this book because like that version of history is like something I kind of like knew about based on like learning stuff about Korea, but like it's not something that's like very forefront. But yeah, like
Yeah.
they treated Korean people the same way, like, you know, I guess the same way the Nazis treated the Jewish people, and then the same way um most other Western countries were treating like other people of color. Like England had their bad history with like Indian people. They were very bad to India. They
Mhm.
still kind of are not great to Indian people. Just like in the race sense, but like, you know, they had their India thing, and then like the US has their terrible history of race with like our Native Americans, and then like the African enslaved people,
Mhm.
and even like the wrong kind of white people, like I was talking about, like
Mhm.
I- Italians and Polish, like, and stuff like that. Like they were just like, no, you're not the correct. Oh, I'm about to sneeze. You're not the correct type of white person, so we don't like you either. And it's kind of weird, like that all of this is happening in all these different countries. Humans are
Yeah,
strange.
well, at the same time too, I mean, we were
Yeah.
putting Japanese people in internment camps,
Yeah,
so
we were doing the
yeah.
Japanese internment here, and that's the only, like, that's another, like, one of the only slices of history that, like, I think I ever learned about Japan and Japanese history is, like, that what we did to Japanese Americans, which was, like,
Mhm.
totally not fair because a lot of them had been here for for, like, generations. It wasn't like, even if they were, like, recent immigrants, but they weren't even, like, it would be like someone going through and just being like, "Oh, well, you used to be there." It's kind of what's happening to like Latin American people right now,
Mhm.
because like there are people who were born here and even like their parents were born here, but if they don't have papers, they're like getting thrown into ICE facilities. We don't like to think about it like that. It's the same type of thing, but it is like we're doing it now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's basically what happened to Japanese people. Like a lot of them had been here for generations, and like we're just living normal American lives. And they were just like, nope, you're Japanese. You might be a spy. I'm gonna throw you in a camp.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's really messed up. But yeah, we don't learn so much like what was actually going on with like Japan, like the type of imperialism that they were doing, we don't really learn about.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, we barely learned about what the Korean War was what was going on,
Yeah.
the Korean War, because you start to
Yeah.
get more about that later in the book.
Right. Right.
Listen, I barely know what happened.
Yeah, I barely know either.
Yeah.
I sort of think my grandfather was in the Korean War. I think he went to Korea. This was before my dad was born, so
Mm,
because he was in the Navy or something. I might be wrong. He passed away, so I can't ask him. But
mm,
um, yeah, the Korean War is interesting. Um, I know that's kind of how like North and South Korea split, and it's also how like you get the whole like China supports North Korea, America supports South Korea thing, which is very interesting and weird.
yeah, yeah, because you have like the communist North and then kind of like East and West Germany.
Yeah, and it's a shame that it's still like that today. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of Korean people really want unification, but I feel like it's a very hard thing because on in South Korea you have like a democracy where they vote for president, and then in North Korea you have a dictatorship where it's a genetic dictatorship, so like passes from father to son. And
Mhm.
I don't know how you'll ever convince the Kim family to just be like, you know, you can't just be genetic
Yeah, you
dictator.
can't be in charge anymore.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know. Really weird. But
yeah.
yeah.
If you ever want a great K drama to watch about this, it is on Netflix. It is called Crash Landing on You. Essentially, it's actually really good. It's so good. I love it. But it's essentially this woman who's like a business mogul in South Korea is like hang gliding and accidentally like gets picked up by a tornado and then dropped on the other side of the demilitarized zone in North Korea and is trying to make it back to Seoul. And that's like the premise of the show. And let me tell you, it's so good. But it's yeah,
I
it
want to
talks
watch.
about
I
it's a lot.
really want to
It's
watch that.
so good.
Sounds so
Listen,
cool.
it's like one of my favorite shows. But Yeah, it's
It's
wild. But they apparently
horrifying.
got a lot of like consultants on it who had defected from the north
Hmm.
to for like accuracy and stuff for like the because a lot of it is set in North Korea. And so
Yeah.
they tried to make it like as accurate as possible and stuff apparently. But yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah.
So not
It's
the
gotta
same as
be
the
like,
research about it, but just a great show.
yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah. Like it's gotta be
yeah.
horrifying trying to defect from North Korea. I've heard some of the stories, like people who have defected, and like some of the stuff that the stories that they tell is like, oh my God, like it's horrible. But
Yeah.
the one like weird thing about it is it's like people are very afraid to like intervene with North Korea because
Yeah.
they think that they may have like nuclear missiles and they might just like blow everybody up, which is not great. But like it's a lot of human rights atrocities going on there, and it kind of
Yeah.
sucks. And it's like bad that it's still like that. But only thing we can hope is that like in the future that situation gets resolved. I'm sure like at the time people thought like the Nazis were unstoppable, and we basically not we and America loves to take credit for it, but it wasn't really America. It was just
Yeah.
the whole Allied forces together ended up crushing that like big regime, and that was like far more strong than what's going on in South Korea. I mean North Korea. But I also think like China's going to have to be like the one to take the lead on that, and at this current juncture, it feels like China doesn't have a motivation to do so.
Yeah. And also like we fought the Korean War. We fought the Vietnam War. And we're like, anti-communism. And like not a ton of good came out of those
No.
two wars. And then we did similar things in the Middle East. And we were like, fighting crazy dictators. And like not a lot of good has come out of it. In the
Yeah.
Middle East, arguably worse in some ways. So
Yeah.
like yes, and also like I don't know. Yeah, is it gonna do more harm than good to go in there?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I 100% think North Korea is the US's fault, but and it's just because of the like remnants of the Korean War. Like I think I think it's the US's fault. I mean, it's obviously China's fault too. Like I'm not like trying to
Yeah,
put
in
the
Russia.
whole of the
Yeah.
blame on the US, but like just the fact that the country split, like South Korea was very important for North Korea. People are starving in North Korea, and it's because they can't get goods, and it's because they can't trade with South Korea. Because if think about it like this, if you cut off the whole South from New York and you just left New York by itself, and New York could not trade with any other US states, they'd be in trouble because it's a colder climate. They can't grow as much there. They can't raise as many animals there. They do have some, but they can't do it themselves as much. And because it's partially North Korea's fault. If they would stop doing some human rights atrocities, they would stop getting so many sanctions, and the UN wouldn't stop restricting trade from there. But
Mhm.
um, you know, at the same time, like Korea never had that problem when they had a fishing market in the south, and they had, people that were growing crops in the rest of the country, and they could just send food wherever it needed to go. So it's partially the US's fault for going in and destabilizing that country. It's partially China's fault for contributing to the destabilization, and then also they consider themselves like supporting North Korea, but they really don't. They don't provide food. They don't provide what North Korea needs, and they allow Kim Jong Un and Kim Jong Il and Kim Il Sek. I don't remember what the first one's name was, to just kind of run amok, and like they just let them do whatever they want without like reprimanding them. And it's just very like it's very much the fault of all these other countries that intervened.
Yeah.
And maybe at the beginning of it, it's all Japan's fault because Japan was the person that was trying to colonize it in the first place. But
Mm.
it's a bad situation. I guess like to try to analyze it politically, like in a quick little book club meeting, is not going to really work. But
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what I'm talking about. So,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah.
But the US, like, just like to go back to like our country and like the stuff that it's done, it has destabilized a lot of other countries and other regions. And often, sometimes with good intentions and sometimes not. Like, sometimes it's more about like what the US is going to get out of it. Like, oh,
Oh
well,
yeah.
the Middle East has all this oil and we want the oil. We want to have control over the oil. And so we're just going to go over there and fight these wars, claim we're fighting terrorism or whatever, or like fighting these dictators or something. And like I think on some level there was some version of it that was like they did think they were doing good stuff, but also they wanted control of that very valuable resource and destabilize a whole region, which kind of sucks. And we've done it in South America a bunch of times too, and
Mhm.
whatever. But anyway,
Yeah. And it gets, I mean, at least where I am, it doesn't get like a ton more political, but it does get a little bit more political
yeah,
as it goes on.
it's very hard to. It's like Rob, Robin, like she used to say the personal is political or whatever. Like it's very
Mhm.
hard to get to like it's very hard to talk about like the lives of people without talking about what was happening politically at the time.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just natural to do that. Like if you're writing something from a certain time period, you almost naturally have to figure out what's happening politically because it's going to affect your characters' lives.
Yeah.
Unless somehow your character's above it all. I don't know.
Yeah. And none of these characters are.
No.
So,
Yeah. I'm very interested to read what's going to happen next. And hopefully I'll read like quite a bit more before next week's meeting. So we can discuss like the book a little bit more than like the world of the book. Like, I love dramaturgy, which you probably already knew. So it's easy for me to like want to dive into like the world and like what was happening. What was that time period like? What was it like culturally? What was it like politically? What was it like in those very specific areas? But yeah, that's very interesting, and I hope to get more of it read. I had such a like busy week that I was like, mm, I guess I'll read some, and I just never could like sit down and read a bunch all at once.
mm,
But
it's
I'm so
okay.
excited to. Yeah, I'm sure like it's gonna go easily because it always happens like that for me. Like I'll start reading the book and it's like it goes slow, and then like once you get to like a certain point, it's just like I want to just keep reading until it's finished.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like this book is never really like slow per se, but definitely like it kind of picks up a little bit
Yeah,
as you go.
I think because it's
Oh,
a book that is spanning so many decades and so many people's lives, um, it's like it just feels like it takes a longer time. Um, and it is a longer book. It's a pretty thick book. Um, just like, it's pretty thick, but it's not thicker than any book we've read. I think like Children of Blood and Bone was about this thick as well.
yeah.
Um, so and I think like because like it spans so many lives and so many time periods, it just feels like it's gonna take a long time. Um, but once you get to a certain point, it reads itself. I also feel like, it looks thick, but these like little sections aren't that long. They're not that hard to read.
Yeah, that's why it like can go fast, even though it's thick, 'cause it's like
Yeah.
it feels very manageable to get through a chapter. It's not like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
always like when I get to the end of a chapter, I'm always like, wait, what happens next? So instead of
Yeah.
just being like, oh God, thanks, I'm finally at the end of the chapter, I'm like, wait, let me read the next chapter.
And it also gets to where it starts like skipping chunks of time
Yeah.
a little bit quicker, so it moves forward a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, because we like sit in the 30s for a long time at the beginning, and then we skip over some stuff
Yeah.
a little bit as we go.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
yeah.
It's gonna be very interesting to see how the countries change,
Mhm.
because this book ends in the 80s, I think. And by the 80s, both Koreas and Japan are just completely different from how they start in this book. And it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like from the perspective of these characters.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too because it's like news travels so much more slowly that there's a lot where they're like, well, maybe we should go back to the north where we're from. And it's like, no, no, no. Reading it, you're like, no, don't go back there. No, no, no. You know.
Yeah.
So, um, or like, oh, I don't know what's happening over there. And it's like, no, don't do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very interesting, like the way life was different in different places, because like it's the 30s and like Sunja is like very excited to see cars. Whereas like I feel like in the US in the 30s, cars were they weren't necessarily as common as they are now, but they were like pretty commonplace. Like I don't think
Yeah.
like the average American would have been like, oh my God, it really does look like a bull, a charging bull, or whatever her thought was when she first
Yeah.
saw cars when she went to Japan. And it's interesting that like that Korea was so impoverished that like even seeing a car was like some like exciting thing in the 30s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's cool. It's also kind of sad, but
Yeah.
yeah. I guess we should close because we're going into seven. It's like 7:13.
Oh, okay.
Like not where you are, but here. Um, but yeah. Pretty good. I'm excited.
Yay. I know,
And,
I'm really enjoying this book so
yeah,
far.
and I love
Yeah.
that we're reading a different culture, because we've read a lot of white people, we've read a lot of Black people, we've read a lot of America and a lot of England, and now we're reading
Mhm.
something completely removed from all of that, and that's so cool to me.
Yeah. It's nice to change it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Have a good week.
And see you later.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. I'm sorry I didn't post on Facebook immediately, but I will check you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. You know how I do. I might be slightly late, but who knows?